So waiting to see if some people join and connect with us. But this is going to be a really good topic, a really good discussion about authentic listening. So can you hear me now? Authentic listening, because sometimes there's about five things. We're going to get into those five things that people do. I call it fake listening, but there's about five areas where people mess up listening all the time. So we're going to get into it in just a bit. But first, I feel like I need to pause and really reflect on this being our first live of 2023. So we'll pause in that for a moment again and see if some people are able to join us in just a bit. All right. But thank you as people come in. Thank you very much. All right. So, again, not taking lightly that this is our first live of 2023. Super excited. Yes, it's a big deal, right? And let me at least say hello and Happy New Year to you all. That's in order. But the beginning of the year is upon us. We're not going to put too much on it, though, right? We're not going to put too much on it just because it's the beginning of the year. Yes, we've done some strategic planning for the year and the quarter. Yes, we're getting specific. But, we really understand that in terms of this social, emotional agility, this work that we emphasize and are trying our best to model is most definitely an ongoing process. We're super clear on that. So definitely wanted to pause and say that for a moment. All right. So, I mean, it's really deeper than just a section on the vision board for us. This is like a part of our purpose. So we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to operate in our purpose because we recognize that we've been gifted to give some perspective, to shine a light, and, if needed, to sprinkle a little cayenne on virtually any educational topic, but the community and the village. And a lot of that comes from communication. A lot of that is our favorite and our focus. All right. So again, just going to go ahead and get started. And again, I can't say it enough though. So thank you for tuning in. Say hello. If you're watching, it looks like we have a couple people watching. Please make sure to say hello. Y'all, we left lurking back in 2022, right? We've been delivered from that. We left that in 2022. In 23, we're executing with intention and with the spirit of synergy. So just again, the community, the village working together. And if you're part of that renegade crew, if you are watching the replay, por favor, please put replay, #replay in the comments, okay? So let us know that you're watching. It is greatly appreciated. And we're going to go ahead and get into it. So if there was one thing to point out and to call forth in this realm of communication, it's listening. It's listening. Hi, Miss Outlaw. How are you doing? Hello. So, yeah, if there's one thing really to call forth for communication, it's listening. It's a true double-edged sword, right? Where it can either build or tear down. And that really can go either way. And there's a lot of things we can think about that it can go either way, where depending on how well the listening is or is not going, it can either build up or tear it down. So some things like relationships, instructions for a task, organizational culture, or literally the organization itself. What are some things you all can think about? What are some things you all can think about that listening can literally make or break? What are some things y'all can think of? Okay. All right. And just in general, before we get all the way into it, when we talk about communication, we really have to pause. We have to pause briefly and explain that that's literally part of how our name, Holistic Fluency, came to be. That's how it came about. So they're, especially educators, right? Educators hear the word fluent all the time. And the definition kind of evolves depending on your content area. So if it's maybe ELAR versus math, right? The definition changes a bit, but the premise, the basis of it is the same, especially even when it comes to communication. So it's this: the ability to express oneself easily and inarticulately. Okay. So that is the basic definition of fluent. So for our approach, we really wanted to do a well-roundedness, a 360 degree, a holistic, right, approach to being fluent when it comes and includes mind, body, and soul. And today emphasizing communication. So what comes to mind when you hear that word communication? What comes to mind? Okay. So again, we're reflecting on and thinking about what comes to mind when you hear the word communication, that topic. What comes to your mind? Right? Usually, most often, people readily say, oh, speaking, writing, and reading, and kind of in that order, truly. But listening, if it's thought of at any point, right, without a reminder, is always the last thing on the list. Always the last thing on the list. And so, about listening, our favorite definition is actually more of a description, a list of characteristics and benefits if you're listening, right? If you're doing good listening. So for listening, we could say it's when you're giving attention to a sound or action. A person is listening if they hear what others are saying and try to understand what it means. And also, listening involves complex, affective, cognitive, and behavioral processes. Yeah, you'll see why it's our favorite, right? This combination of things to define listening, because again, it touches on the characteristics, the description, and benefits if it's done well. So, with all of that impact that listening has, isn't it really interesting? Or we could say it's definitely not best practices to forget. And again, leave for last for listening to be literally the afterthought when it comes to communication. Listening in everyday life, in action, in real time, counts for about 50% of communication. You're going to either be listening on your own or asking someone to listen and understand what you're conveying. So, again, it really shouldn't be the afterthought, right? So, we're talking about also poor listening. So, for poor listening, as we go through, let me pause and say this. So, there's about 5 ways. So, if we say we're focusing on authentic listening, I want you to think and understand that poor listening is the opposite of what we want. But we have to name it. We have to be specific. Y'all know I always say we have to be specific. What does it look like? What does it sound like to you? So, we're making sure to be specific about that. And before I start, clearly, we're all humans. And at some point in time, we have all done any of these 5 at any given moment. All right. So let's go. So, poor listening, first, one particular category you could say of poor listening is spacing out. And you can see it. I know, especially educators, parents, have a really good eye for this, right? If you're talking to someone and they ignore you because their mind is way somewhere else, you're talking, you may be pouring your heart out, maybe not, right? It might not be a super serious topic, but it's something that you felt inclined to share. And they're thinking about their grocery list. They might be scrolling on their phone. They're just really not with you. It's not authentic listening. They're spacing out, right? Number 2, pretend listening. Super similar, but they are distinct. They are different. So when you're talking to someone and they aren't paying much attention, but you're getting various phrases, like cue phrases like, oh yeah, sounds great, right? Or even if they're saying them at inappropriate times, like times that wouldn't make sense in the certain natural pause and flow of conversation. So that's pretend listening. So then we also have number 3, selective listening, right? So for selective listening, it can be when you're talking to someone and they only paid attention to the part that interested them, right? So that's part 3. So again, at any given time, we all have done this, right? Maybe someone's checking in, talking about their day. And, depending on the story, it's getting a little long. You might have spaced out. You might have done some pretend listening, some, yeah, right? And maybe when they talked about something, again, that interests you in the day, they're talking about what they're cooking and you were thinking about what you were going to cook, then maybe you perk up in that selective listening moment. So again, it is very possible to do all 3, excuse me, not even all 3, all 5 in the same conversation, in the same exchange and interaction. It is quite possible. Very much so. All right. Number 4, word listening. When you're talking to someone and they were only listening to your words, so not the emotional composition behind it, right? So they're very detached from the emotion that you wanted to convey as you were expressing, and they're just listening to literally the words you say. But clearly in communication, we know, and especially as we're building our authentic listening, that you cannot separate the emotional component, the emotional aspect of the words. Number 5. So for number 5 is self-centered listening. When you're talking to someone and they only see what you're saying from their point of view, from their perspective. So this is something we end up talking a lot about, because this is a lot of where communication goes wrong all of these are, but if I had to choose, right, if you said, well, which one is the most common, Anika? I think I would say the self-centered listening, because if they can only understand a perspective or a situation, from their perspective, then they're not really focusing on it and listening to understand your perspective, right? And so that causes a lot of issues. And I wanted to kind of add on to this one for self-centered listening, that they understand and see it from their point of view. I kind of also want to add this little this subtitle, if you will, this subcontext for self-centered listening. And we've seen maybe some posts and some memes about it when people say normalize, where you don't tell a similar story when you relate to someone, right? If someone's talking about, oh, my 6-year-old something, 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 sometimes we feel the need and internally to try to match the story in attempt to, relate and connect and build your relationship. And I know that I've had to check that for myself a lot as I'm working to build relationships. But in that moment, if someone is just sharing, they just wanted you to listen. It wasn't necessarily about, hey, do you have a story or a situation to match? Right? People ask what they want to know. So I kind of wanted to add that sub context there for the self-centered learning, to be careful about the sharing, trying to match stories, those situations. And I have a little bonus prepared for y'all as well. So if we talked about those five basic categories of poor listening, the spacing out, pretend listening, selective listening, word listening, self-centered listening, both contexts, right? Then guess what? We talked a little bit about what happens, but I often talk about the misses and disses of communication. Guess where they come from? They come from this poor listening. Those 5 areas that we cover beget, right? They're the cause and effect. Shout out to the ELAR teachers, right? They're the cause of the misses and disses of communication. And when I say the misses and disses, I'm talking about misunderstandings. Oh, well, I thought you meant, because something happened with the listening, any of the 5 categories. Misinformation, because again, maybe you were selective listening, word listening, right? Detached from the emotion. And speaking of detached, the first dis, right? If the misses are misunderstanding and misinformation, the first dis is disconnected. So you were trying to only absorb the words and not the emotion, but that is part of the communication together, right? They're being communicated simultaneously by design and on purpose. The second dis, if you will, is disguised, right? Sometimes people try to be slick about why they're listening, why they're asking the questions. So the intent is sometimes disguised. Yeah. So the misses and disses are a direct effect of poor, inauthentic listening. So we don't want any of these things to happen, or we want to lessen the chance, right? Let's be honest. If we want to lessen the chance of them happening, we need to make sure that we're checking ourselves and being mindful and not doing those 5 things. So we can cut down on misunderstandings, misinformation, a disconnection, and disguised, right? Like the motive behind the question, right? Okay. And so, really quickly, my name is Anika S. Jones. Please say the S. I'm the community curator and also serve as the lead consultant of Holistic Fluency. You all, we add values to individuals and organizations by building relational capacity and emotional agility, right? We want to make sure that, people are able to be smooth with it, right? With their emotional intelligence. We want people to be relational ninjas out here in this life. We generally aim to give you something to think about, and we want you to make sure that you save this so you can refer back. If you have any questions regarding social emotional learning, social emotional intelligence, emotional agility, all these things, please do slide in our DMs. It will answer you back, and we may even do a video or a live about it. So please do like and follow the account, repost, share, tag people, all of the things. Y'all know what to do now, but you are greatly appreciated. And thank you for joining. See you soon.